in recent weeks, naririnig po natin si Presidente Duterte at yung mga official niya committing to the international community the administration's commitment to uphold human rights. Pero sabi pa ng Human Rights Watch kanina, mukhang wala naman actually pagbabagay. It's actually looking like it's getting worse into the future of the president. Naalala ko po yung noong umpisa, nag-utos sa PNP na magbigay ng mga guidelines on how to adhere to human rights. Kayo po bilang the main enforcer of laws, kumusta na po yung program nyo ngayon sa police for respecting human rights?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for inviting us here, ma'am. Well, insofar as the Philippine National Police is concerned, we have been doing this for the longest time as regards the advocacy that we need to do insofar as human rights protection is concerned. And I guess at no time in our history that the Philippine National Police has been really pursuing its cause for the respect, protection, and promotion of human rights. In fact, around the world, you cannot even find any unit in their law enforcement institution that is dedicated to addressing human rights except the Philippine National Police. And you also have the Armed Forces of the Philippines that has its own human rights office that is also pursuing its cause insofar as international humanitarian law is concerned. And we feel that we have been doing our level best. There really are imperfections, and we cannot avoid this in any human endeavor. But we hope that our countrymen will be able to understand that deep inside our institution, we have been doing our level best to address issues and concerns as regards protection of human rights. If there are violations that may have been committed by our police officers, the PNP leadership does not condone this. And those acts that are being committed by our erring police officers are being subjected to automatic or motu proprio investigation from the Internal Affairs Service. And if there are violations being committed indeed, then they will be facing sanctions. And of course, if we speak of data, we have had many of these cases that have resulted in the dismissal of our police officers who have violated a lot of things. And we look at this at the perspective of the rule of law. So long as you are compliant with the rule of law, then there is certainly no violation of human rights. Conversely, if you actually have been not compliant with what the rules provide, then there certainly are violations of human rights. And these are the things that we have been injecting in the consciousness of our police officers. And under no circumstances are we going to condone any of the acts that are inimical to the police service. And we have many applicants in the police service, and we cannot even allow any minute longer for any erring police officer to stay and commit infractions of law and besmirch the reputation of the PNP as a public service institution.
So, General, to what do you attribute all these negative, do you call them perceptions or reports? There are complaints against the administration before international bodies, the foreign media, and even local media. They are criticizing the human rights abuses in the Philippines. To what do you attribute this? Are these just perceptions? Is that what you're saying?
Well, not only that, I guess the narrative coming from those who are bent on destroying the government's efforts seems to really sort of find anything that is wrong so far as what the government is doing. Yet we have to understand that human rights is not only about what the police is doing. It's not only about simple law enforcement. It's a huge perspectives of how we view human rights across the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. And I guess if we are to equate human rights as only referring to what the police or what the law enforcement is doing, we have a problem there. And the narrative must also speak about what the president has actually done insofar as pursuing the cause of human rights. He has, in fact, enacted a lot of laws that pave the way for the protection of humans, especially of the poor. And I guess this must also be given appropriate recognition in the international community. And speaking of the international community, no less than the United Nations has recognized the efforts of the Philippines insofar as the pursuit of human rights. It may not be perfect, but at least we have been doing our level best. And as a result, they have been extending, the UN system has been extending some sort of a technical cooperation as well as capability building for our government authorities to help us out in order for us to fulfill further what needs to be done as far as human rights protection is concerned.
Anyway, sir, but what I wanted to ask you was this: how do you reconcile po your stated commitment? I mean, the PNP's stated commitment towards human rights and the respect for human rights, with, for example, the president's consistent attacks on human rights concepts and human rights advocates. I mean, it's no secret to anybody in this country that the president likes to belittle human rights. Sometimes, yes, he says that it's important, but most of the time, in public statements, he has repeatedly hit human rights. So, how do you reconcile that po?
Well, I cannot practically speak for and on behalf of the president, sir, but insofar as law enforcement is concerned, he actually has been telling us you just comply with what the laws provide. And true enough, that is what we have been doing. Of course, the coercive nature of our work suggests that some people really wouldn't even understand, much less appreciate what we actually are doing for the best interest of the greater number of people. But because of our role to enforce the law, we just have to carry out what needs to be done in order for us to maintain law and order, peace, and of course, making our people feel that indeed they can work and do business in and find the opportunity for other people to live a happy life, I guess. And I guess the law enforcement institution, the PNP itself, has not only been doing this as the way they are expecting us to do. We also have some kind of human activities, like for example, during rescue operations, we have been extending a lot of relief kind of work where the police has been quite visible. We happen to be the most visible government at work, especially during time of calamities. And this, I guess, is something that we must also include in the narrative of ensuring the protection of human rights. But every so often, we are always being equated with violations of human rights. It is as if we have not done anything right for the Filipino communities. And we actually have been pushing reforms as well. Of course, our leaders come and go, but the programs are still in place. Even our manuals in human rights have already been integrated in our system. Under no circumstances where courses are being conducted without human rights subjects. And the Philippine National Police, especially the 215,000 strong police forces, have matured enough to understand how it works with regard to protecting the best interests of our people, along
Yes,
with
sir.
the
Well-
protection of human rights.
Yes, sir. Well, certainly, sir. We don't. We're not asking you to speak on behalf of the president. But what I did want to ask you was that how are you as a policeman, and how is the PNP as an institution able to reconcile those two apparently conflicting viewpoints? On one hand, as you said nga, and the fact that you have a human rights office, the PNP as an institution respects and upholds the concepts of human rights. But on the other hand, the commander-in-chief repeatedly and very, very publicly attacks the concepts of human rights every once in a while. So, ayun lang po, how do policemen reconcile those two things? Is there even a need to reconcile those two things?
Well, in public, you may have heard the president saying this thing, and I guess from our end, he would also tell us to do what is right. And that is how the president seems to be projecting himself, and the people seem to be, used to having our president do this. And for about almost 5 years, we have seen a president that is quite sincere in perhaps speaking his mind, and we give it to him. But as far as the PNP is concerned, he always has been telling us, just comply what is in the rules. You just have to enforce the law without fear or favor. You just have to make sure that in the performance of your duties, the rules of procedures need to be followed and all that. I guess he has never abandoned actually as a lawyer those that actually have to be understood from the perspective of law enforcement. And the PNP is, of course, being the premier law enforcement institution of the land, has to comply what the laws provide. And we cannot get away from the fact that in as much as our commander-in-chief telling us what needs to be done, then I guess we have nothing to worry about anything that comes out of his mouth. We just have to still comply with what the rules provide us.